G'day guys, we've all seen that the Emperor's Children and the Creations of Bile have been making big splashes around the world, winning majors and GTs within the ITC circuit, and I'm here to add one more legion to the list of absolutely brutal Chaos Space Marine legions capable of going undefeated at a GT, ITC ranked event and absolutely crushing that first place position. So what I want to talk to you about today is my recent results from the Menza Masquerade GT here in Melbourne, where I took the Black Legion, went undefeated, and took down that first place overall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into a 6-part video. In the first part, I'm going to break down my list. I'm going to talk about every unit, every warlord trait, every stratagem, and every decision that was made during that list writing process so that you can get a better understanding of what I ran at the event and how it worked. And then I'm going to do a separate video for each one of the rounds. So I'm going to talk about my opponent's list in detail. I'm going to talk about the decisions that were made, the secondaries that were selected, everything. So it's going to be a long mini series of sorts where there's going to be 6 different individual videos so that you can sort of digest it at your own pace. This is just going to be one of them. So if you happen to have not seen the other ones and you might have accidentally stumbled onto a part 2 or a part 3 of this series, make sure you go back to the start so that you can get a bit of an understanding of the list that I ran. And then the other videos will make a little bit more sense when you're looking at the games that we played and how it all sort of worked out on the tabletop. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into this video.
One for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, welcome to this part 2 in my Black Legion mini-series where I'm talking about my results from the Menza Masquerade, which was a GT here in Melbourne that I won first place overall, went undefeated with the Black Legion. So really strong showing at this event, really happy with my results, and I wanted to share them with you. This is part 2, so if you haven't seen the part 1, make sure you go back and watch that. In part 1 I talked about my list in great detail. I talked about all the different strategies, all of the different combos, and everything that I sort of built the list to do. In this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about the Imperial Knights matchup from round 1. So this was against Will Milton from Queensland, absolute legend of a bloke. And yeah, we had a sick game. Last time I played him, he destroyed me with his Knights. Absolutely destroyed me when I was running Night Lords. So I was keen to get that revenge. And yeah, let's just say the Black Legion, they turned it on and they got me what I needed. So we're going to go through his list in this video. And then we're also going to talk about what secondaries I took, what secondaries he took, and basically a bit of an overlay of how the sort of game unfolded so that you can get a bit of an understanding about how I went about securing these victories. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into Will's list. Alright, so you'll have to forgive me, I'm not a huge expert in the Imperial Knights, so if I get anything wrong, apologies. I'm not trying to misrepresent Will Milton, but yeah, so this is basically his list. So he had an army of renowned Free Blade Lance with Chivalric Oath, Defend the Realm, Lay Low the Tyrants, Protect Those in Need on his errand. And then he basically went into his list. So he had a Lord of War, which was a couple of armigers. They were Free Blades. Their martial tradition was Hunters of Beasts and Questor Imperialis. And basically that was 2 Helverins. One of them had the Bastard's Helm and an Ironhail Heavy Stubber, and the other one just had the Ironhail Heavy Stubber. So that was his first 2 knights. Then he had another unit of Warglaves this time. They were also a Free Blade. They had the Strike and Shield, and they were Questor Imperialis. And that was just 3 Armiger Warglaves with Melter Guns. Then we go into his next Lord of War, which was a Knight Errant, which was a character. He had the Exalted Court, Herald, Free Blade, and he had the Helm Dominatus. His martial tradition was Paragon of Honor. He had a Reaper Chainsword, he was a Revered Paragon, his Warlord trait was Iron Bulwark, and he also had Revered Knight. Then we go into his next Lord of War, which was a squad of Knight Moraxes. So these guys were also Free Blades. Their martial tradition was Last of their line, and these guys were Questor Mechanicus. And that was basically 2 Knight Moraxes with Lightning Locks. Then we go into his next Lord of War, which was more Knight Moraxes. Also Free Blades, martial tradition was Noble Combatants, Questor Imperialis, and here he had one whose heirloom was Helm of Nameless Warrior. He had an heirloom of the household, 2 Siege Claws, and a Rad Cleanser, and then the second one just had the 2 Siege Claws with Rad Cleansers. And then he rounds the list out with another Lord of War detachment, which was an Armiger Helverin, Free Blade with a martial tradition Mythic Hero, Questor Mechanicus, he had a Helverin, he was Knight Baron, he had a Cognus Heavy Stubber, Warlord trait blessed by the Sacristans. So this was a very intimidating and very powerful knight list. Now, I don't know about you guys, but every time I get paired up against knights, my brain just fucking melts out my ears. Because listening to them list off all of the different things they have, it's like a billion things. Like everyone has like 3 traits, warlord traits, noble fucking traditions, fucking all this sort of stuff. I was just like, I can't keep up. I can't follow what's happening. So my advice for when you go up against knights is just let them prattle on. You're never going to learn it all unless you play knights, or unless you have a friend or something that plays them regularly, or you're dedicated to putting in the resources to actually learning every fucking codex. And if you are that, congratulations. You're probably watching me to learn Chaos Space Marines, or you already know everything, in which case you're not watching me. Either way, playing against knights can be quite intimidating. So the advice I have is, instead of listening to them list off their thing, just let them deploy their army. Ask them the important questions first, like, do you have any ability to redeploy units? And do you have any pre-game moves? And any advance in charge? And once you know those 3 things, you can pretty comfortably deploy without knowing what their army really does, right? You can ask the range of their guns, and then you can pretty much deploy going, okay, cool. He can't redeploy anything. His turn 1 charges can only come from those 2 knights because he just told me that those 2 can advance in charge. You can deploy pretty confidently. You can deploy pretty safe. So just let them deploy. And then once they have finished deploying their army, just point at each model and find out that, what is his abilities? What is his abilities? Not the names, tell me what he does, And that will make your life a shit ton easier. Whereas if you read their list and you don't have the models in front of you to reference, you're going to forget it by the time you finish deployment anyway. And then they're going to pull these gotchas on you where you're going to be like, fuck, I wasn't expecting you to do that because I forgot that you had that ability. So I always advise just figure out the key things, like their ability to do damage to you turn 1, and deploy according to that. And then sort of just let them deploy. And then once they've done that, go, okay, now run me through just, what each model does. And that'll save you a shit ton of time, and it'll make your life a shit ton easier when it comes to understanding what your opponent's army actually does. The other thing that I really struggle with when I'm versing knights is their whole secondaries. Their secondaries are so strong. They got one of them where they just move into the center table, do an action, and they get points. It's kind of like the Word Bearers one, but without all the crap. You don't have to have an icon, they just do it. There can be enemy units there, they don't care, they just do it. They get 5 points if they do it with a big guy. It's so really, really strong. Then they also have one where basically all they have to do is not fall back and not get, tabled, and they just score 15 off it. Like, that one's really, really strong. And as you'll see, Will got quite high scores on his secondaries. So as a result, I think one of the keys to beating knights is to try to push them around in terms of primary, and then pick one of their secondary objectives and try to cripple just that one. You're not going to be able to stop them all. If you try, you'll probably fail. You'll probably fall on your ass. So picking that one secondary and be like, okay, what's that one? Oh, you've got to get within 6 inches of the center. I think I can stop you from doing that if I just go hard on the center and create big bubbles and big auras and put Abaddon in the center. And now it's like, oh yeah, cool, come near the center, I dare ya. Like, those sorts of things is the way to beat knights. You've got to pick one secondary and try to cripple it, and then go for as much primary as you can. Because often if you play knights aggressively and you're able to kill lots of them, they're going to slowly run out of units, and therefore their ability to get more primary than you is going to be crippled. So going for those 2 things is my advice. So let's have a look now at the scoreboard from mine and Will's game, the secondaries that were taken, and we'll break that down a little bit. Okay, so we played the Scouring. This was round 1. Will got an 83 and I got 93. So we'll go through Will's scores first. So these are all going off memory, by the way, so they're pretty close. The scores are obviously taken from BCP, and then I've sort of just extrapolated what I remember the secondaries and the primary to be. So as you can see, Will got a 45 primary, which was unfortunate. I was trying to stop him, but I just couldn't get there. However, I was able to damage his Renew the Oath down to only scoring 6 points, his Honor the House down to only scoring 12, and his Yield No Ground down to only scoring 10 victory points. So I was able to do pretty good work into his secondary objectives, which ended up with him on an 83 points. Against him, I took Bring It Down, obviously, because you don't even have to kill half of his army and you'll get max points there, so that was a no-brainer. And I then supported that with Raise the Banners High and Warp Ritual. Given that he had no Psykers, Warp Ritual felt like a really safe choice. And then knowing that there was going to be a big fight in the center of the table, I took Raise the Banners High, knowing that I'd be able to defend the ones that I raise early in the game. A lot of people will tell you that when you play the Scouring, not to take banners, because the downside of taking banners in this mission is that those two objectives that you can raise early are closer to the center of the table than in other missions, which means your opponent's ability to take those banners off you is quite high. However, I knew that if I put those Terminators up in the middle, Will is not going to be able to ignore them. He's going to have to go all in on them at some stage, which means he's not going to be sending units down to deal with my cultists. He's not going to be sending units down to deal with my raptors. So I was able to raise those two banners that are near my home objective, really like on my home objectives, really, really early, and hold them for the duration of the game. And when you're able to do that, that's a really high banners score. Warp Ritual, obviously, is really, really easy to achieve when your opponent doesn't have Psykers. You just go, cool, it goes off on a 3+, you can't do anything to stop me, I'm going to max that out. Unless they're really good and they're able to kill your Psykers. However, my list does have 2 character Psykers in it, so it's actually quite good. Even if they do kill one, I can jump on it late game with the other one and keep that score ticking up. And then obviously Bring It Down, no-brainer, into the Knights. Now just sort of a quick recap of how the game kind of worked, because there was some interesting stuff here, where basically I got the first turn. Will had deployed exceptionally well with his screens. There was not much I could really do in that first turn. I could drop down, and I identified that I reckon I would have been able to kill maybe 2 to 3 armigers in that first turn if I used my Veilbreaker Plate and sent in the Terminators. So that was going to be my plan. But then I rolled my Illusory Supplication and rolled a 1. So failed my Illusory Supplication. And then I was like, okay, now if I send in those Terminators, yeah, I'm probably still going to kill those 2 or 3 armigers, but then I'm fucked. Then he's just going to go all in on me and kill all the Terminators. So I was like, yeah, not great. And I was like, oh, but maybe if I do get Delightful Agonies on them and I do get the Mutated Invigoration for +1 toughness, I might be able to tank a lot of that damage. Or I could now put Creations of Bile on them and then send them in and force him to come in and kill me in combat and then do a bunch more damage fighting on death. So I could do that and force that extra kill, was my thoughts. But I was like, yeah, but if I send them forth and then in the Psychic phase, if I fail Delightful Agonies and I fail Mutated Invigoration, then he's just going to shoot me dead. He's not going to engage me in combat and I'm going to be in a world of trouble. And that's just game over. So realistically, I had a choice whether to send them in and rely on those 2 psychic powers going off or hold back a turn and send them in later. So I decided to go with the latter and I held them back. And basically in my first turn, I did nothing. I just sat there essentially. And then in his turn, he moved up into the center of the table, did his action, filled out his screens a little bit more, and went in and killed one of my Decimators. So I was like, okay, I was sweating at this point. I was like, this is not a good start to the event. And the last time I played this guy, he absolutely embarrassed me. He bent me over the table and spanked me. So I was like, God damn it, it's going to happen again. But I was like, no, I'm just going to, toughen up. Let's get it done. We're not here to fuck spiders. So I basically went into my second turn, got my Illusory Supplication this turn. So I was like, all right, now it's time to swing back. So I sent Terminators in. They managed to kill 2 armigers on the drop. So they basically shot one dead, charged the other. My 2 Decimators killed the one that he threw into my backfield and killed my Decimator, so killed 3 in that first turn. And then I got my Warp Ritual off and I held that center. Then in Will's next turn, he sent everything in and basically he killed the whole Terminator unit, but on the swing back, because basically he had to throw multiple things into combat, he'd fight, and then I would interrupt with Mark of Slaanesh, so I get to fight after his first fighter, and on that fight, I killed another knight. So basically now by the second turn, I've killed 4 of his small knights, which was really strong. And I had warp timed Abaddon up into a real strong central position. Then in my next turn, so basically that was his turn, he charged in, killed the Terminators, but that was about it. He put all of his shooting into the Terminators because he wanted to soften them up. So that meant the Decimators were fine, the Rhino with the Legionnaires in it was fine, and my banners were all still up. So then in my next turn, I basically sent Abaddon in, and there was 2 of the knights, the little armigers, that had just killed the Terminators. Abaddon snuck right in between the two of them so that he was touching both, and he split his attacks 50-50. And this is when I put Diabolical Strength on him from the Legionnaires. I put all of the buffs on him. I made him super tough, super strong, and he split his attacks. And what this play allowed me to do was he didn't actually kill either of them, but he got both of them into their bottom brackets. So they were both really critically damaged. And what that meant was that when he then fell back with them, he did a fall back and charge with one of them, or there was something, I can't remember exactly how he did it, but I'm pretty sure he did a fall back and charge stratagem, sent that into my characters, but because it was so bracketed, it only had 4 attacks hitting on 5s, and I have 4 up invulnerable saves. So it actually just didn't do any damage. So when he sent it into my characters, it did nothing, and then because it was so heavily wounded, my characters fought back and killed it. So effectively, from my perspective, Abaddon killed it, because he put it in a position where not only was it not able to do damage to me, but if it tried to, it was going to just die on itself. So that was really, really powerful. Abaddon went in, did massive amounts of damage there. Then in the next turn, Abaddon went in, brought down his Big Knight, killed that, while the Decimators shot and killed another Armiger, and then it was pretty much game over. Like, Will had lost so much. His board presence was just gutted out by turn 3 or 4, and we ended up scrapping for the center. He ended up killing Abaddon, I think, on turn 5, but it was kind of irrelevant at that point. Abaddon had gone in, he'd done his damage, he'd buffed those Terminators up so that they could do their damage. He'd protected everybody by doing damage to the, wounding those, bracketing those Armigers. It was a really, really strong game for Abaddon and a really, really strong game for the Terminators. So that more or less rounds out this match against Will and his Imperial Knights. I had an absolutely amazing game. Will's a really good guy. There was he really set the tone for the event where he was really forgiving, really informative. He was telling me things that he absolutely didn't have to tell me. He was just, really, really great sportsmanship. And that got me in a mood to be following that exact same thing. I'm a huge advocate for letting your opponent set the pace of the game. And basically, Will was giving me so much information and telling me so many things that there was a point where he went to fall back from Abaddon, and he went to fall back to stay exactly 3.1 inches away. And I could have just not said anything and then gone, okay, it's at the end of your movement phase. Cool, I'm going to spend 1 CP to use this Slaneshi strat to consolidate move 3 inches into you. And then I could have fought first and I could have killed that knight as well. But I was like, you know what? He's been such an absolute legend during this game. He's been so nice. He's been so, friendly and good sportsmanship. I'm not actually going to do that. Even though it was a perfectly legal move, I was like, nah, he's set such a high standard. I'm going to follow that standard. And I warned him, I was like, mate, just make sure you move back 4.1 inches, not 3.1. And he looks at me confused and I'm like, I can do this trick. And he was like, oh my God, thank you so much for telling me. Like, he didn't see that coming and it would have done even more damage to him. But I think basically as soon as your opponent sets the tone of the game, if they set the tone that it's going to be a really friendly, really fun game with a high sportsmanship standard and open information, well then I am more than happy to play that way. That's exactly how I prefer to play 40k. So great job, Will. I had a huge amount of respect for you after that game because I know a lot of other people in your position wouldn't behave the way you did. So huge amount of respect. And yeah, that rounds out my Imperial Knights game. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're an Imperial Knights player, let me know what you think of Will's list. If you're even competent with Imperial Knights and you know what they do, let me know. Because to be honest, I've played it and I still don't know what they fucking do. I just know that Abaddon kills them. So yeah, let me know what your comments are in the below. Let me know whether or not you think this would have been a favorable matchup, how you would have gone about playing it, what you think of the tricks and the strategies that I employed. And I look forward to catching you guys with the next part of this episode series where we're talking about all of my games from the Menza Masquerade. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, if you want to show your support, you can head over to Patreon. We've got a Discord community in there where we talk strategy and tactics, and I give one-on-one coaching advice to people who want to get better at the game. So we've got a lot of fun happening over there. And we also have unique, custom, bespoke, Patreon exclusive dice that are really, really cool. They've got the blog logo on it. And then we've also got t-shirts like the one I'm wearing now available on my Teespring site. We've got objective markers available up on 3d6wargaming.com. All the links in the description. So if you want to show your support for this channel and help me continue to grow, continue to improve, get better equipment, all of those sorts of things, that's a great place to do it. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one.
Slog for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.